Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 224. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me this week, Gail from Communities Digital News, Jacob from Jab Hook Boxing, Daniel from The Inscriber. What's going on, lady and gents?
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, and don't we all need a diversion this week to something fun? Boxing.
Ain't no lie.
In the United States, we do.
Man, I just needed something to divert myself from that text that we all got at 2:18 this afternoon. For those
enough to make you throw your phone across the room.
Man, look, some people I know who got 2 and 3 texts from the same guy, but yeah, I don't get that, but it is what it is. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, live YouTube show, podcast, as well as a blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is, when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, we will talk about it. If you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, blog page is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. That's the link. Check the right of the page. You'll find links to the pages all over social media, Facebook, Twitter, G+, you know the deal. Also, if you check the right of the page, you can find links to where to find the show on just about everywhere that carries a podcast, minus Spotify, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, you know the deal with that as well. Let's get things going here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to recap the fights that took place this past week. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have everybody involved in the discussion about one specific fight, and then designate a certain fight to each individual. That way, hopefully the show can go along smoother. The fight I want everybody to talk about is the finals of the World Boxing Super Series Super Middleweight Tournament. Took place in Saudi Arabia this past Friday. On last week's show, I may have mistakenly said the fight was going to take place Saturday. In fact, it took place Friday. Final between George Groves, Callum Smith for the World Boxing Super Series title. And I must admit here, I'll just start the conversation with you, Jacob. Since you gave the accurate prediction, I was wrong. I thought that Groves, assuming that he was not shot warm, would be a little bit too much for Callum Smith. I just thought he was just the overall better boxer. And the fact that Callum Smith up to this point was really unproven and untested. However, in analyzing the fight, and again, I'll start with you, Jacob, the thing that surprised me, first off, I knew Callum Smith was the bigger guy, but I didn't know he was that much bigger than George Groves. And I'm not talking just height. I think a 3-inch difference in height, but just overall size. He looked a full division, maybe 2 divisions bigger than George Groves. And let me say for the record that Smith stopped Groves in the 7th round. Once I saw that Smith was able to box with Groves through the first half of the fight, I knew I was in trouble. And then once he hurt him with the left hook, counter left hook, I believe it was, he pounced. So again, Jacob, I must give you kudos. You saw it from jump. I didn't. Your observations of what went down.
Actually, kudos also to Daniel. I believe he also picked Callum Smith. But yeah, it was, Groves, he has a lot of skills, and, like I said before, he's very good. But I just thought that, again, he's a little boxing old. Like, he's been in a little bit too many battles. And I thought that Callum, if he was patient, which he was, would be able to capitalize on that. And able to use his size, and he was able to do that. He, when he got, I believe it was the 7th round, he caught him with that left hand. He had been catching him with the right hand, but he eventually caught him with the left hand, hurt him, and then as Groves went to the corner, he actually kind of finished him with a body shot. He hit him with I think it was a right hand again, but then he did a wicked left hook to the body, and that was all she wrote for Groves. So, it was a really impressive win. I agree with Daniel. I think he had said it on the previous show that he's the stronger of the Smiths, and so I look for lots of good things from him.
Sorry, I was on mute. I go to you, Gail and Daniel. Your thoughts on the fight? Were you as surprised? I know you predicted, and to you, Daniel, specifically, I know you predicted Smith to beat Groves, but were you surprised on how the fight went? Go ahead first, Daniel. Gail said you can go ahead first.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. Okay. I wasn't surprised when I saw the size difference. Callum is a pretty big kid. He's a little bit like Jared Hurd in the sense of the fact that you can tell he's gonna be 2 weight divisions above in at least 3 years from now. But he's in a very, very good place. And he always had the potential. I've always said it, like I said last week, of the entire Smith family, he had the biggest potential. And he showed into it. He showed patience in boxing. He showed good countering when Gross was able to attack. And then in that 7th round, that left hook was beautifully landed, perfect distance to land it. And he did what a lot of young fighters, when they're presented themselves this opportunity, hesitate to do against somebody like Gross, who can strike with one big punch. He pounced. He went in. He threw good shots. That left hook to the body Jacob mentioned. Now, I know there was some criticism from the ref because he said some people mentioned that he should start the fight a little bit sooner because Gross was already going down as Callum was landing the punches, but
and he kind of turned his back to him as well. If you really look closely,
yeah, I think that's probably more affected a body shot more than anything. It's like that instinct reaction, you just want to turn when you do the body shot. Now, it's not like as willful as it is, but it is an instinct when you get hit that badly to the body. But it was good. It was efficient. Groves can make the argument now, as it stands currently, he can make the claim to being at least number 1 or number 2 at super middleweight. And you know what? You have to give props to Eddie Hearn. He could have had this fight in the UK. He could have had any put in the advantages put on the table. He trusted Callum well enough for him to go to Saudi Arabia, completely foreign territory. You don't know what you're gonna get there, as far as what to expect from the judges, from the crowd. And Callum came through. And now we have to see how it ends up. Do we see especially now with the political landscape the way it is, with streaming and services, can we see a match Resurdo? Or does he stay in the UK? Like I said, try to get a money fight with Eubanks, Fido Sitagi. So there's some good things that Callum can do, but he earned his victory and he showed pretty decent maturity beyond his experience and age.
I'll go to you, Gail. Your thoughts?
To add to what everyone said, what I was most impressed with is when Callum did land the big shots, when he was finding success, he closed the deal. There were several fights this week where, in my opinion, the guy who had the upper hand could have stopped the fight, could have gone for the stoppage, could have been more aggressive, and for whatever reason, did not. And we've had crazy stuff with judges, folks. It's a rule of boxing. If you don't have to let it go to the scorecards, that's the only way you can be assured of the outcome. Plus, it's good for fans. It's exciting. That's what you need to do. Callum Smith did that. That, of anything, is what impressed me most about the way he closed the show. He made sure he got that stoppage. And I agree with Jacob. Groves is skilled. He gave it his best, but he's surprisingly young considering how he looks, and he does fight a bit shop-worn. That's a perfect word. And I think that was partially what made the difference. It gave Callum Smith the upper hand, but then when he got the advantage, got Groves hurt, he did not back off. Due credit to him. That's absolutely what impressed me most about the fight.
Okay, Uskategi fought in a non-title bout. He looked in. You also got David Benavidez, who's going through his own personal troubles. Cocaine, tested positive for cocaine. We talked about that last week. You got Zurdo Ramirez out there. Moving forward, given how Smith looked in this fight, you also got DeGale, who recently relinquished the belt. Moving forward, where would you put Callum Smith among the top fighters at 168 pounds? Anyone?
And here we are all thinking about it with our mics closed. Super middleweight division, it's one of those that it becomes competitive and then it drops off the radar. And, you just ran through most of, what I would consider the main names. The question, it's super middleweight, which is kind of interesting, is do you have anybody that would want to move up? The other name floating around out there, which does not interest me, frankly, is Chris Eubank Jr., which is a makeable fight. Both UK fighters. And the rest, a lot of the rest of them have, started to age out. It's a tough one do you want to give somebody, who's trying to fight his way back an opportunity? Do you schedule somebody like, I don't know, Anthony Jarrell against him, who I think would end up being cannon fodder, frankly. I think he'd kill Zurdo right now. I think
really?
Zurdo, I do. I think Zurdo's in big trouble right now. I'm not seeing progression from him. We were so enthused about him and his potential. He is not reaching his potential. And I like him a lot. There's so much to like about him. And in that division in the rankings, currently he is ranked second behind Smith, overall, if you're, looking at the general rankings in that division. But he has not faced the same caliber of opponents, and he has not had a performance like we saw Smith have against Groves. The only one that Zurdo has had even close was against Artur Abraham. And, come on, Artur Abraham was fading at best. He was on the downward side of the bell curve when he fought Ramirez, to be fair. Still the best opponent he'd faced, and he did very well. But, yeah, that to me is not enough of a test. So, you do have some question marks with Smith and where he's going to go next and who he's going to face. A lot of those top names right underneath him, he hasn't fought them. I don't think any of them will give him much of a challenge. If you look at Eubank, Uskategi is probably the right one for him to face. You have Jesse Hart floating around out there. That would be an interesting fight to me. I'd like to see that kind of challenge if he's, and I guarantee you Hart would be willing to take that in a second. I think Benavidez is the one that would give him the biggest challenge, but Benavidez has got to get his shit straight right now, and he is not. So until that happens, you might as well look down into the division and knock off a few names that'll sell a few tickets. Have a fight in the United States, maybe against somebody like Hart or Jarrell, and make himself known here.
Pose the same question to you, Daniel and Jacob. Where do you see Smith amongst the super middleweight landscape? Or let me add a second question. Given his obvious size for a 168-pound fighter, do you think the future lies at 175 pounds?
I mentioned it, like, given the state of the division now, he's at least one or number two. Because the division, a lot of its great champions right now are aging out or have moved up. So in that sense, I could see him number two. Like I said, Usatagi probably is going to be number three. Zurdo's kind of number two by default. I do have to agree, because out of all the other champions, he's the most tenured out of almost all of them, as it stands now. But he, like I said, I've had this nagging thing with Zurdo. I know you guys probably have all seen it. I think he's a guy that always fights down to the level of his competition in a way, and it hurts him in the end because he doesn't put as much effort into it. He should be a star. The guy has charisma. He boxes pretty well when you give him a chance. And he does have great marketability. But unless he's really, really challenged, and right now the only challenge is to fight the other champions, he doesn't show up. And if this Callum shows up against Zurdo, I'm agreeing with Gail. Zurdo's in trouble. Now, a fight that I would like to see, just given how young they are, and should the young man clear his situation up, not being in love with the Coco, is Beterbiev. Because technically, Callum, until he got into this tournament, was the mandatory for the WBC. When it was with Badu Jack, he was the mandatory. When Badu Jack moved up, they had the fight for the title, and Beterbiev won. So technically, that should be the fight that should be easier, that should be good enough to make, because it's two young guys, two guys that are pretty big for that division. We should remember that David actually started out as an actual heavyweight at one point. So that would be a very interesting fight to make, but I could see Eddie Hearn trying to play it safe, because now he can put Callum in the zone in the U.S., or try to get like an all-UK fight going with Eubanks. Like I said, it's a decent money-making fight, even though at this stage, Callum, I think, part of washes Eubanks. So it'll be an interesting journey, but I think within 2 to 3 years, he'll most likely be a light heavyweight. And considering that frame, I wouldn't surprise me 3 to 5 years he's at cruiserweight.
Want to thank Gus, Olaf, Battle Rifle for joining us in the live YouTube chat. Check your Skype, Gus. You asked about a link. Check your Skype. I left you the links in there. I'll go to you, Jacob. The question finally to you. Your thoughts on Callum Smith and where he lies within the 168-pound landscape, or do you see his future as a light heavyweight?
I don't think now he'll move up. I think he's just established himself at the super middleweight, so I think he'll ride that for a little bit. And I think Daniel made a good comparison to his body type being like Hurd, who could probably easily move up maybe a division or two, but he continues to campaign at that division. So, I think he's going to stick around. Hopefully he tries to get the big fights. Hopefully those fights get made. I agree with the panel that he beats Ramirez. He might actually beat him pretty easily. Hart, who was a name that was thrown in the mix, actually had Ramirez had a really tough fight against him. And I know he's been wanting that rematch, and he's actually won 3 in a row since that loss. So that's something I think you could throw his name in the mix. And we all know with Benavidez, obviously he has to get his act together. But that would be, I think, a really good fight between him and Smith. And I got to rank Smith. He's definitely in the top 2 because Groves was the favorite, I believe, to win the super middleweight tournament. And, he was a belt holder. and he got beat convincingly. So you got to give, Smith a pretty good ranking there.
I see Gus has joined us. I'll get him into the conversation. Your reaction to what you saw from Smith and his stop at George Groves, and where do you see him? How do you see him in comparison to the light heavyweight landscape? Not light heavyweight, super middleweight. Do you see his future as a light heavyweight? Those questions are to you, Gus. Unmute your mic, please.
Hey, Mike. Everyone else? Hope you're all good.
Hey.
Mike, I felt George Groves was defeated going into this fight. And that was the reason why I switched my bet on Callum Smith, and I felt Smith had a chance of stopping him, so it turned out to be a shrewd decision. What it was, Mike, was post Chris Eubank, where George Groves, dislocated his own shoulder by, winging away a punch. So it was at his own volition. But all of the talk after the fight was retirement. He was just consumed with retirement. And even sort of post-surgery, he was extremely skeptical as to whether he would, reclaim the shape and thus, defend his title in the final. There was negativity throughout the camp. I think it was only the last sort of couple of weeks that he felt he had the strength and the durability, but the negativity is still there if you're contemplating retirement. Whereas conversely, Mike, Callum Smith has been seeking a duel with George Groves for a number of years, and this fight had parallels with Josh Warrington and Lee Selby for me, because when Warrington was with Matchroom, he was talking about Lee Selby 2-3 years ago before the fight had transpired. So during that ensuing period, he had studied Lee Selby intensely, trying to ascertain all of his weaknesses and then formulate a game plan how he could, dethrone him. And I felt Callum Smith did exactly the same, Mike. Him and his team, they devised a good strategy. And it was a relatively simple strategy, Mike. Callum Smith, 6'3", 6-inch height advantage. He boxed tall, Mike. He picked his punches well from long range, did not force his head over his feet. Groves, conversely, he's low left hand, and he's when he's recoiling his hands, he's not bringing up, and that has finally caught up. And Callum Smith must have picked that up from hours and hours of watching him both live and on the video, and realized that not only when his left hand is low, but his head falls down the center line of the axis. So once he throws a punch, his fundamentals are a bit bad. He doesn't step to the side, whatever, to get his head off that center line. So Callum Smith will just fire that straight right hand, straight down the pipe, more or less single punches. We saw the difference in their punches as well. George couldn't really. He was trying to set those traps with those jabs, and it was a good jab he was throwing to the body. He does have, one of the better jabs around, but he couldn't get that looping sort of right hand because Callum Smith wasn't falling for those traps to come too far into sort of punching range. He didn't want to go out of mid-range too much, even though he can fight at short range and he's not a bad inside fighter, because Smith doesn't have good feet. So George Groves, his feints and his excessive feints weren't working as well. Callum didn't take the bait. He kept to his game plan, kept to that long range, picked his punches well. And we saw eventually, that beautiful check left hook. And George Groves, didn't really recover, Maybe it may have been sort of one punch to the back of the head as well, through all of that as well. But, the body shot took him down. But George Groves got up. He could have carried on, Mike. But it's that defeatist attitude, Mike. He didn't really want it. He was resigned to defeat. It's a changing of the guard in that sort of UK sort of, domestic rivalry stroke world title. And, Callum Smith, he made the decision of not going into for the WBC, where he was a mandatory for a long time. He chose an alternative path, and it's paid out for him. So, yeah.
Comparison between the other super middleweights. Gail, Daniel, I believe Jacob too, said in looking at the landscape, Gus, he have his way with Ramirez right now. And the fight that they all would like to see Callum Smith face is Benavidez. Your thoughts?
Mike, 2 years ago, I mean, when Smith was on, I mean, although I've got and it's well documented, a disdain for the entire Smith family. Smith was on my Smith was on my sort of infamous pound for pound sort of prospect list, not pound for pound prospect list, going back a few years, because there was definitely talent there. So I didn't want to. I kept my prejudices aside and said, look, I'll just speak about his talent specifically, even though they're extremely annoying, and hence I just want to disregard all of them. But he's not a bad fighter, Mike. I think Jose Uzcategui may be the best for me out of all of them. At 168, a fight between him and Callum Smith, I think would be an excellent fight. They can both fight at that sort of range. In terms of the domestic fighters, James DeGale James DeGale needs to retire. He made a wise decision in not pursuing Uzcategui, dropping his belt, because that guy would beat him into a retirement home now. David B, good fight as well. They're all pretty damn big super middleweights. He doesn't have a lot of time left, Mike. I think 175, but he says he can stick around for maybe another year, maybe try and unify first of all, have a few defenses, make some. I think he might even go after Rocky Fielding, Mike, in a rematch for that WBA regular and this. That wouldn't be a bad fight. I think Rocky Fielding, I don't think he's a bad fighter at all. He just got caught cold with Callum, in the first round, but he's a little bit better than that. I don't know, Mike. I couldn't say definitively that Smith is the best. I would say Uzcategui number one. I'd say probably Benavidez number two. Ramirez and Callum Smith is a toss-up, Mike. I don't think Ramirez is as bad. I know he's been getting a tremendous amount of criticism. There are a lot of weaknesses to analyze in his performances, but I don't think he's that bad, Mike. I think a fight between him and Smith would also be a decent fight. Contrasting styles there. So all to play for, Mike. I don't think definitively anybody is number one. A bit like the heavyweight scene, I think.
Interesting. Let's move on. Like I said, I want to split these fights up. Going to Jerwin Ancajas fought Alejandro Santiago Saturday in Oakland. Going to you on this one, Jacob. I don't know if you saw this fight, Gus. If you did, please comment. I'd love to hear your comments.
No, I didn't, Mike.
Okay. So I'll just stick to Jacob on this one. The fight was ruled a draw. Wide disparity in scorecards. I think it may have been 4 or 5 points for Santiago on one card. Similar scorecard to Ancajas. The third scorecard was a draw, so it was a split draw. For me, Jacob, I felt Santiago won the fight. I felt that way when I watched it live. Watched it the second time, feel the same way. I was a little bit disappointed in Ancajas because there was no adjustments, Jacob. He kept fighting the same way. While Santiago, he kind of old, man, him a bit. He set the same traps over and over again. He'd wait to let Ancajas lead, exploiting Ancajas' weakness. Sometimes he fights in front of himself. and then he would counter. And it was that same pattern all night long. And I didn't see a different strategy from Ancajas all fight long. He tried to fight harder, but he fought harder doing basically the same thing. And Santiago basically used his guile. He has a little bit of an awkward style. He's a little bit herky-jerky, but he used his guile and his movement, hands and feet, uh, to me, do enough to deserve the fight. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Santiago won the fight. To me, I haven't really been that big on Cajas. He's like the Filipino Verdejo to me. I was never really high on Verdejo, and he basically imploded. And it's kind of I guess weird that they're both with Top Rank and both like highly touted. But I thought Santiago did all the right things and was landing the more effective punches on Ancajas. And again, I agree with you. Ancajas doesn't have or didn't have a plan B. He's kind of, I think, I don't know if he's kind of believes the hype that was kind of touted around him, as this next Manny Pacquiao, which, whenever there's a Filipino fighter, it's always the next Manny Pacquiao, which I think is dumb because, I think Pacquiao is a one-of-a-kind fighter, and you don't have to be the next Pacquiao, be the next Ancaja, make a name for yourself and do what, best suits you. But, yeah, I mean, the scorecards, the one scorecard, I think was 118, 111, and then the 116, 112. Santiago, he deserves a rematch. I mean, I think even in the eyes of the fans, and I believe the ringside, most people thought he won the fight. So he was, in a way, he was kind of robbed. And I don't know if it has something to do with because Ancajas is promoted by Top Rank, and that's their star. They don't want to, unless you knock him out, then they're not going to give him the win. But yeah, it's a little disappointing in the cards. But as Gel said earlier, don't let it go to the cards.
For me, I don't think it's a case of him getting kind of caught up in the hype, because from what I've seen and read, he seems to be a pretty humble and disciplined kid. For me, it's just a simple case that he got exposed from a technical standpoint. And and his corner got exposed from a strategic standpoint. He's a little bit too heavy on his feet. He doesn't double jab. There's no flexibility, or at least in this fight, no flexibility in terms of his mental approach. He's a good boxer, and when he's in there against an inferior boxer, that skill shows. But when in this fight, it showed when he's in there against someone who can really think, who can really adjust, who doesn't fight one way, he's in a little bit trouble. He's in a little bit of trouble. So for me, it wasn't an issue of attitude necessarily in terms of ego. For me, it's just a fear, just a case of technical flaws on his behalf, skills on his behalf. They were exposed. Am I wrong there, Jacob?
I guess what I mean by that, I wasn't saying that he necessarily is, is a cocky or isn't humble, but sometimes when you have a certain team around you and they're pushing you as the next big thing, I think that can kind of maybe subconsciously slip into you and think that you don't have to do certain things to win fights, that you're as skilled as they say you are, and so you don't come in with a plan B and you don't do the things, you don't make the adjustments, and you don't do the things that can win you the fight. But again, that's just my perspective.
Duly noted. Duly noted. I'll go to you. Give me a quick second here. Yeah, I'll go to you. I'll go to you, Gail. Well, yeah, I'll go to No, I'll go back to you, Jacob. The co-feature with Uskategi. Did you see that fight? And if so, your quick thoughts.
Yeah, I saw it.
Because I saw it and he won, Jacob, but I was like, yeah, he could have done more. He should have done more. He really should have stopped this guy. He was playing too much for me.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it, and I agree with you. And I think Gail had said it, like kind of the theme of the show was, you know, doing enough to, you know, to finish the fight. And I think he had his opportunity to do that, and he, for some reason, he just carried his opponent, and I think that's a bad thing to do. Unless there's a strategy behind it. If you're trying to get a fight with somebody and you want to show that, hey, I'm weak, but you're not really. You're doing it to kind of relay a message to your, you know, somebody else that's watching it and saying like, oh man, I could beat him because look at, you know, he's carrying this guy and he could have had him out there. You know, sometimes, you know, people do that. They have game plans to do that, but I don't believe that's the case. You know, he should have put him away. You know, he's put away better fighters and like Jarrell, and you know, it was just to me. They were getting a lot of boos throughout the fight, and it was a bad look for him. You know, as the champ.
Okay, now I'll move on. I'll go to you. I'll go to you, Daniel. Devin Haney fought Juan Carlos Burgos. Burgos has fought for a world title before. Good fight for Haney to show, where he is in his career. He won. He pretty much dominated. Your thoughts?
Devin Haney is a good example of a fighter that has skills beyond his years. Remember, the kid's very, very young. I think he's still 19 or 20. And he fought really well. He dodged Burgos' best punches when he could. He countered effectively. Just the way he set up the counters from the angles that he was throwing in was beautiful. And he was patient with it. Okay, like he didn't have to knock Burgos out, but he was patient with it. He got the rounds in that he needed to get to. But he showed his versatility of his combinations. He showed the angles that he can throw it in. He showed really good hand speed. And he showed that, yeah, the kid's very young. Give him a year, you might see him challenging for a world title. He's got technically like the North American title, the IBF North American title right now from that fight, but it also is a good testament to, I know how a lot of people like to say that the American, at least when it comes to young boxers, isn't as fresh as it is. Like Devin Haney, between Haney, Rafael Lopez, Jose Ramirez, they show that there's young fighters that are now coming up through the normal American ranks that are still showing great versatility and great skill. And I just say give him a year. And considering he's a lightweight in the IBF and considering who hovers around the title picture in the IBF right now, you're going to have a good fights coming up next year with Devin Haney.
I go to you, Gus. You join us live from the UK right now. I don't know if you've seen much of Devin Haney in the ring. If you have, your observations of him in terms of his style and potential.
No, I haven't seen hardly anything of him, Mike.
Interesting. I got to share some footage with you. I don't know if you saw this fight with Linares and Abner Cotto, Facebook Live. If so, your thoughts?
No, I haven't seen anything, Mike. Boxing has been absolutely garbage, man, recently, so no, I haven't seen it.
Okay, I'll go to you, Gail. I'll get you into the conversation when we talk about HBO and Mikey Garcia doing the news segment. Gail, your thoughts on Jorge Linares versus Abner Cotto? He stopped him, I want to say, in round 4. I mean, look, he moved up to 140 pounds. Showed surprising power to me. Really took Cotto apart, didn't have any problems with him at all.
He walked right through him. I was at this fight. Linares is coming back from his defeat by Vasyl Lomachenko, decided to go up. He decided to give himself a little test fight at the new weight in a small venue. So he was out in fabulous Indio, California at Fantasy Springs, and a lucky about 2,500 people got to see him up close. He delivered a really good performance. And what was even more impressive to me is, as we spoke to him at length, actually, after the fight, he was fired up. He was enthusiastic. He was extremely pleased. He said he felt great. He loves the new weight on him. He's happy he doesn't have to struggle to make 135 anymore. He said it was killing him, and he was laughing about it. And he's ready to go. He's got a new light under him, and that's very exciting to see. I was happy to see the speed carried up into the new weight division, and the power was very impressive. You know, you wouldn't think 5 pounds would make a difference, but without struggling to make weight and then rehydrating at a weight that's more comfortable for you, it makes a big difference. He did say, however, that one of his goals before he retires is, as he put it, to remove the thorn in his side that is the loss to Lomachenko. And he said if he had the chance to rematch him, he would agree to go down to 135 if he had to. He also said he'd do that for Mikey Garcia. Otherwise, he said, nope, I like 140. I'd like to stay at 140. I have no doubt he can get another title at 140. And it's making for a very, very exciting division. I was just extremely pleased to see him back in the mix, looking so good. And the fans were extremely happy to see him. He got a very warm welcome from some folks who got to see him very, very up close. It was a wonderful opportunity for anyone who took advantage of it.
You mentioned that you said you can see him. You can see him going for another title at 140. Relic and Hooker, I believe, are fighting in the junior welterweight tournament of World Boxing Super Series. Got Jose Ramirez, who just fought a very exciting title defense. The IBF title is vacant. Moving forward for Linares, what route do you see him going in order to get another title opportunity?
Oh, you mentioned absolutely one that I think is within his grasp, the winner of the Relic Hooker fight. I believe that Relic will win that fight, and I think that's a great match. Trying to think who else holds those belts right now.
Ramirez is WBC, and I think IBF is vacant. I could be wrong though. Yeah, IBF is vacant because Mikey Garcia gave up the belt.
I think he's very hungry for Ramirez. He did mention Ramirez as a sort of a dream fight for him. I mean, he could take on any of the guys underneath in the top 15 or so if he wants a few more tune-ups. I do think it would be smart for him to take at least one more tune-up fight, but I mean, he is ready to go. He is very eager. He talked about possibly fighting one more time this year, so we'll see what happens. He's very ambitious. Really, seeing him that enthusiastic was very exciting.
Going to some news here, and I'll go to you on this one, Gus. I want your thoughts on this from an international perspective. The big news over the past week ago or so, or since we did the last episode last week on Monday, I believe it was, HBO has announced that it's saying goodbye to boxing. In short, you will not see any more boxing broadcasts on HBO. There's been talk about this for close to a year now, rumors now, really over a year, that HBO is, we saw the waning interest from a financial perspective, and they finally said no more with the sweet science. With the rise of Showtime, top ranking what they're doing, Hearn and the Zon, HBO was losing, to put it kindly, in comparison to the other avenues and networks. And let's not forget Al Heyman, what he's doing. Your reaction, your thoughts from an international perspective in terms of in the ring competition as well as financial, Gus. HBO deciding to say farewell to the sweet science?
You know, Mike, it's a strategic decision following the merger of its parent company Time Warner with AT&T. So it's not due to that their finances was in a vulnerable position and they're due to file for bankruptcy protection insurance. Nothing to do with that whatsoever. If they had desires to continue broadcasting and showcasing boxing, then they clearly have the capital reserves to invest substantially. And if HBO wanted to, develop even their own services, third party or signed fighters, and they had, they had the authorization to do so and the funding, then they could pretty much sign whatever they want, Mike. The relationship, the sort of affiliation between HBO and boxing goes, way back. I mean, I remember when Lou Duva started that old HBO After Dark series, which was, one of the best I felt, around. But over the last sort of few years, we've seen the level of investment and even their pay-per-views being sort of, curtailed significantly. They were only really focusing on sort of one or two marquee fighters. But then they made a couple of good decisions. I felt the Superfly was certainly a bold decision, and the first one was a great success. It's always difficult, as we know over the years, focusing on a weight class which the numerical advantage is not as much as boxing. It has that linear relationship between weight and money. The higher you go up in weights, the more money the fighters make. The average size of the population, what they watch. So it's all to do with sort of demographics. But now we're seeing slowly, maybe HBO have seen that, Golovkin, one of their stars for a number of years, no more, or certainly on the back end. Sergey Kovalev, pretty much at the end as well. Guys who they'd invested heavily in. Saul Alvarez, I don't know how many fights he's got left. I think he had one fight on regular H. There was some deal, some contractual dispute between them. I don't know how they're going to resolve that one, but yeah, it's a pity, Mike. It's a shame because the more broadcasters they are, the better for the neutral perspective. I don't give a shit about who's got whatever else. I'm not really paying for any fight, so I don't really care. It doesn't concern me. It's an avenue. I personally, I always preferred HBO, Mike, specifically for the picture quality. I think it's way better in the sort of clarity and sort of production. So I always preferred HBO to Showtime. Showtime started 10 years after HBO. If you look at the two companies, Mike, CBS, Showtime, they got 50 million subscribers. Their profits, their turnover is less than $1 billion, is about 960. It's like 20 times smaller than what HBO is grossing, and both from subscriptions and their market share.
Yeah, it's been that way from jump. It's always been that way.
And their revenue, so they're completely different. But no one broadcaster is able to achieve economies of scale now in boxing because it's become so defragmented. And everybody is now going to these streaming services, which is good in a way because you're no longer going to be paying 80, 90 pounds for a pay-per-view. And people were getting extremely pissed off with HBO's, the fights they were putting on. We've seen Top Rank move to ESPN, and I felt that was the last straw, Mike. They were declining a number of fights, and Bob Arum, who's seen as the godfather of boxing now, if they're not going to sign his fights, they're going to be putting his fighters on pay-per-view. Then,
if you don't mind me interrupting, you mentioned the streaming aspect of this and how it played a role. I thought initially when I heard rumors about HBO saying that they was about HBO and boxing, how they was going to let it go. I thought that they was going to hold out until Joshua's contract was up with Showtime. Do you think that the fact that Hearn announced his own streaming service with DAZN, that was kind of that moment was the final nail in the coffin? Because I felt that if they could hold on, sign a mega deal with Joshua, keep Canelo and Golden Boy, that maybe that would entice him and be enough. So do you think that aspect, the fact that Hearn and Joshua decide to go their own way, that was just like incentive for HBO to say enough with this?
It's a very good question, Mike, but I think it's more due to the the beneficial owners of HBO now. I think AT&T specifically, they have absolutely no interest in boxing, Mike, both from a historical point of view and going forward. So I really think it's a cost-cutting exercise, and they're streamlining that point of HBO subscription service. So those deals, we're talking about insignificant amounts of money. If their annual budgets are what, $50 million, then clearly they could have signed additional fighters, but they could have reached out to Joshua's negotiating, his management team well in advance and saying, look, if you do have one more deal forthcoming with Showtime, what are your options after? Because Joshua was free to sign with whoever internationally from the point of his fights being broadcasted internationally, specifically in the US. Eddie Hearn didn't constrain him, saying that, look, you have to go with, my new company or my new ventures. So there was none of that. It was free. So no doubt he would have had meetings with HBO, etc. Absolutely. He didn't disclose any details, so I'm not sure, what was communicated between, whether they'd advised Joshua, look, not interested in going forward. So, but he would have been under any remit to have disclosed that information, especially before a merger. So I don't know, Mike. I get the feeling, Daniel may be able to shed more light, but I get the feeling it's more due to AT&T, and their sort of strategy going forward.
I wanted the international take from Gus. I'm going to Daniel, Gail, Jacob with here with the domestic U.S. take. Your thoughts on HBO departing with boxing, and you can follow up Gail and Jacob and keep the conversation going. I'll be right back.
Okay, Gus, I'm glad you drew the comparison when you mentioned AT&T, because this is a similar comparison to what actually happened, interestingly enough, involving Time Warner about 17 years ago, involving a wrestling company called WCW. That company was owned by Time Warner. They had their own network. They were doing money, but they were doing bad business, unfortunately. And when another merger happened, obviously the AOL Time Warner, with AOL taking the head position, AOL wanted nothing to do with wrestling. So they let it pretty much wither and die. It's a similar comparison to this in a way, where AT&T is not really buying Time Warner for HBO. They're not buying it to put in the fights into it. They're buying it because they have a lot of original programming library. And you can tell by the budget that HBO and the direction that they're going, particularly the sports budget, that original programming is going to be, it's always going to be what they were going to lean towards forward, whether it's documentaries, probably a little bit more polished version of real sports. Probably focus a little bit more, try to do, instead of one training camp, probably do 1, 2, 3 training camps with Hard Knocks. Or try to do a Hard Knocks version, because remember, they're owned by the same company, that says broadcasting rights. Do a Hard Knocks version of the NBA on HBO. So there's always been an avenue with HBO where they thought well beyond, unfortunately. And in all aspects, like when it comes to what streaming has affected it, it's the ease of it. You can access it anywhere. Like one thing that I liked about the DAZN fight, like with Joshua and Povetkin, it was available on demand immediately after it was over. Immediately. If you want to be on demand HBO for Canelo Triple G, you had to wait until they broadcast it on regular HBO to show up on some cable services on demand. They're certainly to show up on mine. So I'm not surprised. It is heartbreaking in a way because HBO has been boxing for a lot of people. It has been boxing for an entire generation of fans, for an entire generation of promoters. But when companies have different directives, when companies have different priorities, there's not much you can do. I've completely tip my hat to them for the decades that they gave us, the great fights that they gave us. I think their last card is going to be December. The December card that they want to have with Munguia, with possibly been Canelo too, because they're trying to maneuver anything in the way to try to get a December fight with Canelo. Particularly what happened with the WBC convention today. But it's sad. It's sad from a fan's perspective. Granted, in an era where we have more access to fights from so many other different avenues, it's very sad to see one of the titans of the sport fall.
Gail, Jacob, your thoughts?
Well, among this group, I'm the one person who's worked with HBO boxing, especially in the last few years as I've brought on main events as a client of my firm. And, it is tremendously sad. 42 years, HBO has been in the boxing business and done a wonderful job. It truly brought some iconic fights. I agree with you, Gus, wholeheartedly. The Boxing After Dark series has introduced a lot of exciting performers, a lot of exciting athletes to the audience. But for those who go back far enough, and if not, we'll have a little history lesson here on the Pound for Pound Report. Before there was an HBO, people couldn't imagine boxing without ABC Sports or CBS Sports. And they've been gone from
NBC.
for a long, and NBC. And there was a time when they were the dominant broadcasters and their personalities brought us the fights of those eras. They're long gone. Howard Cosell, I couldn't have imagined boxing without him as a youngster. Long gone. HBO, things evolve and things change. And they've seen the writing on the wall. Things are going to streaming. People are demanding more flexibility. They don't tie themselves down to a couch and, watch at home completely anymore. There are economies of scale doing it via streaming. And HBO for the last few years has really tried to go for quality over quantity. And that's happened in all of their programming as they've seen their efforts like Game of Thrones and Westworld and Veep pay off for them with big numbers. And as they've sunk more and more investment into that programming and been successful, the pot has just gotten to be less and less and less for boxing. And I will give them credit for this. If the powers that be, the decision makers at HBO, decided, listen, we'll only do boxing if we can do it with the quality that we've always been proud to give the viewer. Otherwise, we're not willing to cut it to the bare bones and do a crummy job under our banner. Then it was the right decision. They shouldn't be doing the scrappy little fights, the Facebook watch type of fights. They shouldn't cut corners. When an HBO crew swoops into an arena and you're dealing with all of their personnel, I mean, it's a well-oiled machine. These folks are pros, top of their game, and I'm sure they're being paid like it. Personnel costs are what takes up the lion's share of the money, and I think they'd rather put those assets elsewhere where they've seen a payoff. This does not mean, however, HBO Sports itself is going away. They're going to devote themselves to more documentary and produced style programming. In fact, Jim Lampley has said he's going to stay on for that very reason. I believe they're going to keep the fight game alive, which is very interesting to me. We'll see how that works. I wouldn't be surprised if Lampley got absorbed into the Real Sports documentary team, and he's certainly capable of joining that staff and producing good programming. They'll have a couple more fights this year. And the one other thing that is still potentially alive, HBO pay-per-view is a separate entity. HBO could still produce the occasional pay-per-view fight a year as a one-off kind of contract. Hopefully the rest of the staff will either get absorbed into other jobs or be snapped up by some of these other companies that need them. We should have a few more fights left. You've got the Jacobs Derevchenko fight on the 27th. It's likely there will be a Thanksgiving weekend fight for HBO involving main events. More to come on that. And possibly an end of the year fight with Canelo. If not, it's very likely that Thanksgiving weekend fight will be their last regular broadcast. And it will be the end of an era. But we should thank them, wish them well, and move on to all of the other possibilities now being offered to us. It's not a bad time to be a boxing fan.
Thoughts on HBO saying goodbye to boxing, Jacob?
A lot of good points were made here. Just what I think is that to me, it's pretty simple. HBO is a subscription-based service. So how I see it is how they make money is getting more subscriptions. Maybe in the past, boxing was bringing additional subscriptions because you wanted to see big fights that they had. I don't think that's the case anymore because of these other avenues and the advancement of technology. Where Gus kind of hit it on the head, and I do the same thing. I look through other avenues to get my I do pay for some streams, but for pay-per-views, like I haven't paid for a pay-per-view in years. So I find other ways to get that. So with HBO, they're known for they were kind of on the forefront of their original programming shows like Sex and the City, Sopranos, their Game of Thrones, all that stuff. That won them the Emmys, that get them more subscribers because people get invested in these shows. That's the way that they seem to be going. And we saw writing on the wall when they were, tailoring away their kind of war chest to other things. And I think the Netflix and Amazon kind of getting into the game and doing a similar thing, putting pressure on them because they're coming out with original movies and original content and challenging them to steal subscribers, at a much cheaper rate. I think that's putting pressure on them. So again, to me, it's just a business decision for them to, as a subscription base, is that they have to get more subscribers that want to pay. So, you don't go to HBO for movies. You go basically for their original shows, and that's where they're going to put their efforts. And as Gail said, and as they announced, they can get into the occasional, pay-per-view if they want. I think that's going to be a little hard because the fighters that aren't on their regular broadcast that they're going to lose. I imagine they're going to sign with somebody. So I don't know how many of those pay-per-views are things that would be worth a pay-per-view. Because in my opinion, it was one of my predictions, I think a couple years ago, that pay-per-view was a dying business. They don't have as many big fights anymore that people pay for that hit, the buys that they deem acceptable. So when these fighters, like Jacobs or whoever, turn to some other entity to sign with, be it DAZN or ESPN or Showtime. I don't think they're going to be available to do these pay-per-view fights, and there's only a handful of pay-per-view fights they could do. But I was lucky enough to be able to see a lot of their growing up as a kid watching boxing, was see a lot of fights on HBO, and so I'm appreciative of being able to see that and go to a bunch of live events that they promoted. That they showed. So we'll see where it goes.
I mean, listen, we've all, well, a lot of us are old enough or young enough, depending on how you want to word it, young enough where we don't know boxing without HBO. Uh, Times change, people change, and with technology, even boxing has to change and adapt. However, it is sad that one of the institutions that we grew up watching, vis-a-vis the Sweet Science, is no more. However, as Gus, Daniel, Gail, and Jacob duly noted, economics demand, technology demands, the way we watch television, how we watch television, that has changed, and as a result, HBO has adapted. Unfortunately, to boxing's expense, but as Jacob said, at the end of the day, it is a business decision, and HBO did what they felt they needed to do. And besides, given the advent of streaming and whatnot, given the many ways in which we as boxing fans choose to view our fights, the avenues that we go to view our fights, um, as much as you're going to miss boxing on HBO, we will get through because we are going to see our fights regardless. So while we're going to miss HBO, the sport must move on, and the sport will move on. Going to you with the second news bit. I'm going back to you, Gus, to start the conversation. Um, when Mikey Garcia beat Robert Easter, all the talk afterwards was Mikey Garcia talking of fighting Errol Spence at 147 pounds. The talk made no sense to me. Far-fetched, in my opinion. I just didn't see what made him think he could handle himself with an Errol Spence in there. I think that sensible heads, sensible discussion got into Mikey Garcia's head as news broke today that, in effect, that if Garcia has agreed to terms to fight his mandatory Richard Comey. Date and date and place has yet to be disclosed. Um, However, it looks like that Mikey Garcia's next fight will be a mandatory fight against Richard Comey. And I'm going to you, Gus, first, because you think very highly of Comey. You felt he beat Robert Easter for the vacant IBF belt in 2016, I believe it was. You felt he beat Shafikov in Russia. So your thoughts that Comey, who I wondered was going to get another significant fight at lightweights, because I felt that he was just too good for his own good, too dangerous, not enough reward for the risk. Well, it looks like he's going to get that opportunity against Mikey Garcia.
Well, it's a difficult, once again, it's a difficult fight for him to try and achieve, his aspirations of becoming a world champion. The odds are going to be very slim. But I haven't seen too much of Richard since he signed a promotional deal in the United States. Previously, he was fighting a little bit in the UK. I saw him I was live for one of his fights at the York Hall, Bethnal Green, where he fought a number of years ago. That's when, I think it was just prior to when he won the Commonwealth belt. A lot of Ghanaians, we've seen with Isaac Dogbe as well, based over in the United Kingdom. Yeah, he's a very good fighter. When's this fight taking place, Mike?
No date or locale has been announced, but it was an announcement that the two have, in short, come to terms to fight each other, according to Lou DiBella, who is Come's promoter.
Okay, yeah. So if it's gone to, go on, Jacob.
I was gonna say, wasn't it ordered by the WBC? Is that why this is happening?
Yeah, I think so.
BC ordered another fight for Garcia. Come is IBF mandatory.
Yep, IBF.
You still there, Gus?
Yeah. Not much more I can really say, Mike. A difficult fight. You know, Comey is not going to get the benefit of any doubts. We've already seen that. You know, in Ohio, and we've seen that in Russia as well. I don't know, Mike. I'm a little bit.
You're coming off as perplexed, but Gus, I'm surprised. Did I stump you?
I'm a little bit skeptical on these chances, Mike. It's going to be a difficult proposition. I don't think Mikey will stop him. It'll probably be a points decision, and you'll get the benefit on the cards once again, Mike. So,
and all right. I'll just go around to the rest of the panel here. Your reaction to Mikey Garcia deciding to stay, at least for the time being, at 135 pounds.
I'm fine with him staying at 135. I wish he'd challenge himself a little more than this. You know, if it's a mandatory, fine. You know, it's sort of classic Mikey. He just, you know, unlike the fighter we talked about at the top of the week's show, Callum Smith, he just doesn't always seem to challenge himself at the level you'd like to see. And, you know, the clock ticks for these guys. You know, time is not their friend. And why in the world they wait and wait and wait and wait and avoid until they see the graph start dipping down to finally challenge themselves. You know, it's disappointing when guys that are talented do this. But Mikey has always been, you know, an enigma in boxing. At times he hasn't really wanted to be there, but he's just so naturally talented and has all the support system and the infrastructure in the world to make him successful that, you know, he's pursued the path, then he veers off the path, then he comes back to the path, and then he just sort of stalls in the road. And the fight with Comey just seems to be a stall to me. Yes, I'll watch it. I'm interested, but interested isn't necessarily excited.
Daniel, Jacob, your thoughts?
It's not so much the sensible heads probably to me that got to Mikey. It's more that you get tired of always, okay, you won a belt and then you quickly abandon it. He did it with the 140-pound title. He was going to do it with the same sanctioning body, mind you, with the lightweight title. So I'm kind of glad that it's staying into it. Lightweight is the better way for him. I did not see any benefit of him going up to welterweight to fight Errol Spence. So I'm glad that part of him is staying. Now, I'm glad for Comey, too, because Comey is going to get a real good opportunity where with Easter, it's a young kid willing to fight. You almost won that fight. Shafikov went into enemy territory, almost won that fight. Now you're going to fight somebody that is not really a brawler. He's a boxer. Now he gets to show his full set of skills and see if it's simply a case where he shows really, really good upside against people who are willing to trade with him, or if he actually is good enough where he forces fighters to adjust to him. So I'm very, very happy for this fight. And yeah, anything that keeps Mikey away from Errol Spence and puts Errol Spence in the direction of either Sean Porter, Keith Thurman, that area.
You mean
or
Sean
even
Porter?
now,
You mean Porter? Because
Yeah.
I don't think Thurman going to fight him.
yeah, Porter, like I said, we put Thurman out there, just so I don't have to see the travesty again, Manny, put him in that direction. Don't put him with Mikey. He has no benefit when fighting Mikey. I'm kind of glad it's happening.
Your thoughts, Jacob. Let me say for the record, for me, I'm just glad that Comey is going to get another opportunity for a big fight. Like I was telling Gus, I was skeptical he was going to get it. I thought he was just too good for his own good, too dangerous. But I'm glad he's getting it. I'm glad that Mikey's giving him the opportunity. I will say for the record, I think Mikey will win. Your thoughts on this? If this leads ultimately to a Lomachenko bout, I'm cool. But if this leads to Mikey just being Mikey, as Gail kind of said, yeah. Your thoughts, Jacob?
I was actually surprised that Gail didn't really, I guess, or at least it seemed like she didn't think that this was a good fight or big fight. I think Comey is a very good fighter.
I think Comey's going to give him a fight, no doubt.
I mean, he has 2 losses. They're split decision losses, and arguably he won both those fights. So I think he's a very good fighter. Mikey Garcia is also a very good fighter. There's talk about Mikey challenging himself. Well, him calling out Spence, as crazy as it sounds, it would be a challenge. And if he pulled it off, I mean, if that fight ever happened and he pulled it off, I mean, who wouldn't be talking about that? So I think he does, challenge himself. He has moved up in weight. I am disappointed that, he didn't fight Linares when he had the chance. The Lomachenko fight, I think, is a tough fight to make because of the whole bad blood between Aram and Mikey, but I think it can be made, and I think Lomachenko's even said that he wants to fight Garcia. I think next year, sometime next year, or he's if he keeps on winning and Mikey keeps on winning, so maybe we'll see that fight. But yeah, I like this fight. I think Comey's a very good fighter. I think he's done what he needed to do to keep on fighting, stay active, and keep on winning to get his shots at being a champion. So I think it's a good fight. And again, with boxers, I just want them to be active. It's pretty normal now that these top boxers fight maybe twice a year, and I'm supposed to thank my lucky stars for them. But I miss the days when boxers were fighting 4 times a year or more. But it is what it is.
Mike.
I will give you this. At least he's going to have a fight. That is to the plus column. I agree. At least he's getting back in the ring.
Yeah, Mike. The reason for my pessimism, and it was something that Gail touched upon early on, and Jacob followed up. Boxing fans should be pleading for this fight. Mikey Garcia, Vasily Lomachenko, that fight should happen, and it should have been right now. I won't accept that it's due to altercations between the promoters, whatever. No, if there's genuine will on both sides, a fight can transpire. It doesn't matter whether there's past baggage between the fighter and a promoter. In hindsight, I kind of respect what Mikey Garcia did in terms of extricating himself from Bob Arum. It took me a little while, but I had a little sort of look into that, and I've got no problem with a fighter who wants, autonomy, financial autonomy. He's free to sort of negotiate with any promoter, broadcaster, whatever else, deciding what margin he wants to have on a fight. I've got no problem with that. These fighters have a very short shelf life. We know the risks involved, etc. So they want to maximize their revenue. It's prize fighting at the end of the day. But if it's going to perception and what people have in their pound for pound list, and both of them, high on the pound for pound, and they're both in the same weight category, and they're both champions, then this fight should be happening now, Mike. And I don't give a fuck about mandatories, this, that, whatever else. These are some of the most corrupt bastards on the world, so they can be sumped and conked and prompt and paid off. But that fight should be happening, Mike. And if that fight does not happen, then I'll lose absolutely all respect for both fighters, and you won't see me on this show talking about them.
You're right. However, we could say the same thing about a certain fight that should happen at heavyweight that's not happening. It is what it is with the nonsense and the red tape, and as Lennox Lewis calls it, the politics of the sport, unfortunately. Let's move on to some. Go ahead, Gus.
But I think what it is with the Mikey Garcia, Mike, I think Mikey Garcia deep down knows he'll probably lose to Vasily Lomachenko. I genuinely believe that. His style, he's a classic boxer, and I think that style is all wrong. I think Vasily will have no problem with him, and I think Mikey Garcia knows that. So I think in his risk assessment, when he was talking about the Errol Spence, it's a bit like Amir Khan, Mike. Amir Khan would rather see the afterlife for a few minutes against Canales than face Kell Brook and get knocked out by him.
See the afterlife.
I agree with you, Gus. I think Loma wipes the floor with him, honestly, and he wants no part of that. None.
Yeah.
I disagree with you guys on that. He wipes the floor with them.
Yeah.
If anything that we learned from the Linares fight is that Linares is a very good boxer, and he had some really good rounds against Lomachenko and even put him on his seat. I think Mikey is a live dog in that fight.
I just want to see what happens if Mikey's able to get to Linares' body as well as his chin. He's not as fast as Linares, Mikey, but he hits harder and he's more effective in terms of how he throws his punches. He doesn't waste shots in there. And I think he's slightly better with his footwork than Linares. And I just want to see what happens if he's able to get to Lomachenko. How will he react to that kind of power?
I think the difference, though, between Garcia and Linares, and maybe it's because I just spent some time with Linares over the weekend, is Linares has just got that fire. You can tell that loss to Lomachenko is eating him alive, and he wants to rectify that or get a shot at rectifying that before he ends his career. Mikey's approach toward his career and towards boxing, is at times very lukewarm. Sometimes that bowl of soup just has to be reheated with Mikey for it to taste decent. He's just not got that same kind of fire, and that's the stuff that keeps someone in a fight that's tough. I would really like to see what happens with Garcia when the going gets tough for him and what he does.
Interesting. I want to start shutting the show down by recapping what's happening this weekend. I'm going backward here from the docket perspective. What I put on the docket since Gus is here. Want to go to Thailand first. Srisaket Rungvisai. Been out of the ring a long time since his fight with Francisco Estrada early this year. He's fighting a fighter by the name of Iran Diaz. Am I wrong here, Gus, in thinking that just this is a situation where, as I said, SSR has been out of the ring,
And yeah, he had a non-title fight a couple months back, but they're just putting him in here with an easy title defense against a guy that we all know is clearly the underdog.
Yeah, it's a little bit disappointing, Mike, and I think it's probably something to do with his new promotional deal he signed. But I'm not sure whether they're paying him to the levels at what HBO were paying him for international fights. I think he was starting to make real good money, sort of 300,000-400,000. We were certainly hoping for the one Francisco Estrada fight, and you can see Estrada was absolutely pissed off and hence lackadaisical in his performance. He just didn't really want to be there. He was promised Estrada Srisaket, but that didn't materialize. You can respect Srisaket having one fight back at home. He's fought overseas. He's beaten the pound for pound fighters, Roman twice, and then Estrada. For him to have a showcase fight back home, you can't blame the guy. Absolutely fine. But now, whether they're constraining him in terms of his movements, I'm not sure, Mike. I kind of get that impression. He's got an affluent lifestyle now. He's got some money. I'm not sure if he's still working as a policeman back at home. I know he was.
No, he is not doing anything like that. Nothing that dangerous. However, he is fully qualified to work as a California Highway Patrol officer, believe it or not. And that's what keeps sort of calling him off in the distance and something he wants to do, which he certainly can do after his boxing career is over. He will not be too old to do that. Should he choose to?
Go ahead, Gil. I'm sorry.
Well, should he choose to do it? I mean, if he's made enough money to live on, it's kind of a crazy idea, but, it's something he talks about. He was serious enough to go through the full accredited state of California police law enforcement academies, passed the whole 9 yards. So, who knows? But it'd be crazy.
I think Gowley is right. And if you look at his career, Mike, he had a career before boxing, Muay Thai, where he converted over. So he's actually had a lot of fights. If you go back and look at all of his records and where he's fought, he's had to go to Japan. We all know who he fought in his debut boxing fight, freeweight world champion. So, he's traveled, he's fought a lot, and he's had a lot of fights as well, Mike. So there's a lot of miles on the clock. He may be 30, 31 years old. It looks like a transitional period in his life now, Mike. So you can understand it, but it's a pity because the divisions were absolutely fucking red hot. You were thinking maybe him and Anui could get it in if only, because Gonzalez and Anui couldn't get that fight. So it was so tantalizing. We had those potential mega fights, but they've slipped. Whether something can be salvaged, whether he can be tempted. Given that Superfly 3 or Superfly 4 is now, I don't know what the hell is going to happen to that now. So whether he's going to fight again in the United States at the moment. But the only silver lining, Mike, he had a quick win last time. This will be a quick win as well. So he's turning over these fights relatively quickly. So there's still hope.
And I would assume that the deal he signed with, I think, one championship, pretty major company when it comes to the Asian market, the MMA world especially. And from what I've read, they've positioned him as the guy, as the face of their new promotion vis-a-vis boxing, because they're venturing from the mixed martial arts world to the boxing world. And I would think, Gus, given that they're going to pay him some significant coin as a result.
If they can get Estrada over to Thailand, fine, Mike. Estrada's fought in Macau, China, so he's not familiar to fighting over in Asia. So I don't think he'll be aggrieved of going over there. So if they can put up serious money for that fight over there, fantastic. I love watching, Thailand and Japan and Mexico is my main three, jurisdictions for watching fights. So I'll be super excited about that one.
Indeed. Let's move on to the DAZN card that's taking place in Chicago. DAZN bringing boxing to the U.S. going to go to how I'm gonna do this. F it. Let's go to Big Baby Miller here. I'll go to you on this one, Jacob. Listen, again, am I wrong with this? This is that Adamek at this stage of his career. Is he just cannon fodder for Big Baby?
Yeah, I mean, Adamek is way past his prime. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's been retired, unretired too many times now. But it's that classic story of these boxers that can't let it go. And I imagine it's very hard, because if this is all you know and this is how you make your living, and for all of a sudden that to shut off, it's that's got to be hard. So, I don't, Miller's an interesting guy in the sense that, I'd like to see him get some big fights. But, his performances sometimes aren't that great, but he's entertaining. He talks a lot of shit. And so, he might be able to talk his way into a big fight if he keeps on winning. But, he should put Adamek out pretty. I expect him to beat him pretty easily.
The only thing that interests me about this fight, to be honest, is what's Big Baby's weight going to be? This guy, this 290, 300-pound guy in the ring. No. I don't care what he says. He should not be fighting at that high weight.
No.
Well, he even said it. Didn't he say it in his last fight that he loves hamburgers too much or something like that?
Well, he just, on the one hand, he says he fights better when he's a little heavier, but I mean, a little, geez, he isn't kidding when he, picked the name, when he picked the name Big Baby, he wasn't kidding. Having said all that, boxing needs guys like him. It does. He's a big man with a big personality. He's got, no exaggeration, a huge following. And, he's a draw. You just don't know what the hell is going to happen with him. I wish he'd, work on his conditioning a little, and that goes to the weight. But he's fluctuated in the last couple of years anywhere from 245 up to, he had a fight at 298. That was just nuts. Then he said he dropped a whole lot of weight, and I think he was still at 280. So, yeah, he does need to slim down. But, sometimes you've got guys like this, and they just, they're never going to be an Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder physique. They're a big block, they're just a big block of human being. And you hope it's more granite than, blubber. But as long as he could punch and move, he's fine. Now, Adamek, it's kind of interesting. Adamek is, and you're right, he's still a big draw in Eastern Europe, but he is pretty shot. He is going to be a target for Miller to hit. Miller really needs to score the knockout. But in a way, Adamek is an older, worn-out version of a guy he should fight, which is his across-town Brooklyn buddy, Polish import, Adam Konaki. And they know each other very well. They've sparred together. They're both, Brooklyn residents, one native, one import. And that's a fight that would be a big draw in New York. Big draw. So I see this as kind of a tune-up for that fight, to see how the Polish crowd reacts and comes out, because those same Polish-American fans and Polish fans that will come see this fight will certainly come see a fight with his pal, Adam.
Hey, Gail, do you think Big Baby is kind of like Areola, where
that's exactly what he's like. Yes,
I always thought Areola was better when he was at a heavier weight. Like, he seemed to, for some reason, he fought better, and then when he started taking up the weight,
true. Yeah, I don't know whether it was just, Ariola made no secret of the fact that he was a big guy. He liked to eat. He hated to do road work. When he could bear down and do it, he absolutely could strip the weight off, but it just seemed to drain him so much from the effort that he just wasn't as good a fighter. When he would fight at 230, 240, not so good. When he'd fight it, when he was in good shape and not so beat up, in his younger days, he'd fight at 260, 265, and he looked great. I mean, for him. And I do see a lot of Ariola and Jarrell Miller. I hope a little more nose to the grindstone and a little more skilled. But they do have a little bit of the same attitude and entertainment quality. And there's something about guys like this, and I think I'm not alone. You just can't help but like them. It's just fun to watch them. It's kind of train wreck time sometimes, but it's still somebody you think, oh, you know what? I want to see that. You're not lukewarm about it, no matter what happens. And, the objective, folks, is to put butts in the seats in the end, or eyes on the screen, and guys like this do it.
I'll go to you on this next fight, Daniel. Danny Roman has a belt at 122, I think WBA version. You kind of root for guys like him because he's hardworking and in earnest, always gives you a yeoman's effort every time he steps in the ring. Fighting Gavin McDonnell, your thoughts?
That's going to be an interesting fight. I like Gavin McDonnell. I like the way I do like the way he stopped, but Roman is in a good division right now. Like, it's a division that's right for the picking to get into the right spot, and this is the best stage you can get it in now. Like, you're going to be streamed on a lot of computer screens, and he does have that lunch pail, I'm just going to put on my gloves and go to work type of mentality and type of style. I think he'll win, and like I said, now like what we spoke about at HBO, nudge him towards Ray Vargas.
What was that last comment, Daniel?
Nudge him toward Ray Vargas.
I'll go to you, Gus. Beterbiev, finally getting into the ring. Been a while since we've seen him. It was just like 2-3 years ago. He was one of the most talked about prospect, not just in the light heavyweight division, but in all of boxing. Career derailed due to outside issues with contracts and all that. Finally got that settled, fighting Callum Smith, defending his belt against Callum Smith. Your thoughts?
The long anticipated wait is almost over. The mighty DAZN, in their quest for global boxing domination, and the first place on their roadmap, the United States and their debut, a jaw-dropping card. Now, let's dispel with the euphemisms. This card, top to bottom, is an absolute pile of dog shit.
Tell us how you really feel, Gus.
He will.
Well, you mean, now you are saying technically DAZN's first fight based in the United States, since we have seen plenty of the broadcasts already, Groves and Smith, for example.
Yeah.
Insert Kawhi Leonard laugh here.
Yeah. Now, I do want some clarification from you, Gus. This is a very important question. Is the level of dog shit at the Great Dane level or the Poodle level? Do tell.
Always a massive pile, gal. You can't even see the top.
Sounds like we're going to need a shovel before we sit down to watch this.
I mean, no thoughts at all on the fight, though.
But Mike, the rumor has it that Papua Media Group and Access Industries are not too impressed with the progress that has been made thus far in terms of the promises that we've made in terms of siding fighters. So, and this card, come on, Mike. No one, Daniel mentioned that he likes Gavin McDonnell. Respectfully, you're the only one in the world because nobody else does.
Well, maybe his mother.
God damn.
Yeah. Well, we'll put it this way, Gus.
Yeah.
I have to make it up for my utter disdain for Terry Flanagan somewhere.
I know. Yeah.
Well, that makes two of us there.
You know, I tell you, one thing about Eddie Hearn is that if he likes a fighter, he will push him. A little bit like Al Heyman, and Eddie Hearn has done that with Tony Bellew and Gavin McDonnell as well. He got in the ring with Ray Vargas when he challenged for the title. He got schooled. He got a reprieve against Cal Yafai's younger brother, Gamal Yafai. When Gamal was undefeated, I think McDonnell beat him in that fight.
Excuse me.
So he got a bit of a reprieve, but this particular fight, Mike. Now, Callum Johnson and Artur Beterbiev is. We know Eddie Hearn has been trying to sign Beterbiev, and he's got some sort of a convoluted co-promotional deal. But Beterbiev is still locked in, court battles with Yvonne Michel, who has a stranglehold on the division thus far. But now, I listened a little bit to Callum Johnson recently, Mike. His strategy, or what he's decreeing, is that he's going to go in the ring and fight fire with fire from the opening bell.
That's a mistake.
He said he met Beterbiev, he sized him up. He said the guy doesn't look that big at all. Callum domestically is perceived as a big puncher. He put away Frank Buglioni, the end of level boss Buglioni, who talked about, dominating the 175 division both domestically and internationally. What a complete pile of rubbish that was. So that goes to the sort of level of fighter that, Callum, I don't know, Mike, it's a massive, massive step up from fighting domestic Southern area level fighters to challenging a British and Commonwealth and world title challenger in Buglioni and going into this fight. He's had one round, Mike, I think in 18 or 24 months. I can't be sure.
Something like that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think Eddie Hearn is just feeding him to try and get hold of the Beterbiev somehow. I think this fight, I'm not even going to hedge my play. I think this fight, somebody's getting knocked out and getting knocked out very early. I think Callum Smith gets put away within 3.
Finally, Gail, your thoughts on Dulorme and Jessie Vargas.
Speaking of the theme we've been on, it's kind of like two dogs fighting for scraps under the table here. But any port in a storm, these guys had to talk somebody into fighting.
Stop. Wait a minute, Gail. Stop. Wait a minute, Gail. Stop. I'm gonna skip that because I forgot about these. I forgot about these fights the following day. Sunday, Yokohama Pacific.
Thank God.
Boxing Super Series tournament. I forgot all about it. I should have put it in the docket. My bad, y'all. Bantamweight, junior welterweight tournament, and also a junior flyweight fight. Let's move on into that. Whoever wants to talk about Inoue, Payano, go at it.
Do not miss it. Great stuff. You can see it in the U.S. It's going to be streamed. Let's see the monster have at it. It's going to be a joy to watch. That is boxing skill on display.
Not just skill. It's going to be a good variance in styles because Payano, if you turn his engine on, he's not going to stop. You know that when it comes to Payano. Win or lose, doesn't matter if he's getting the shit kicked out of him. He's not going to stop.
Oh, and he'll get the shit kicked out of him. But you're right. He will go down swinging. Absolutely. He could be pinned to the floor and he's still going to try to reach up and get something done. You're absolutely right. And, whether he gets taken out quickly or not, I absolutely respect somebody willing to get in there, give it a shot, and give it all they've got. And that's why it makes for a great fight, even if it is a bit lopsided.
Outside of now to TV, I don't know any bigger fan of Naoya Inoue than Gus. He's moving up to 118. He's entered the World Boxing Series Super Tournament at bantamweight. Your thoughts on his bout with Payano? I'm hearing some background noise. Daniel, mute yourself.
Yeah, sounds like Daniel's having an asthma attack or something.
Your thoughts on Inoue's bout with Payano?
Yeah, well, from that garbage card in wherever it is in Chicago, at least we've got some boxing pleasure. Yeah, I think I think when sort of watching Inoue, Mike, now there's been actually a lot of criticism towards him in terms of what he's done in terms of his decisions in jumping 2 weight categories, then moving up, not remaining at 115 and fighting any meaningful fighter, and then subsequently moving up to 118. But in terms of his boxing ability, there was still some criticism regarding the Gavin McDonnell fight. They were saying that he was still a little bit too reckless in what he was doing, fighting against a weight-drawn fighter. And there was actually a lot of... I was battling with a tremendous amount of people going back to some of his earlier fights where they were critical of him. But I think when you look at how good of a fighter he is, Mike, and there's one fight in particular which stands out, which I talk about very briefly, is when he fought, when he actually won the 115-pound title, when he fought the Argentinian who may have been sort of old in the tooth, but he'd never been down in the professional ranks, never been down as an amateur as well.
Yeah, because yes.
Yeah, because he was a very slick southpaw fighter with a tremendous defense. Even when he fought a major puncher in the Filipino Flash as well, although he was very negative in the fight, but there were periods of exchange, and that's when the Nair was in his prime, when he had tremendous power, and Narvaez took those punches flush, and he never buckled at all. So he was a very, very good fighter, very underrated fighter, and that's how he was able to sustain himself and fight, up until his late 30s, early 40s, and the way Inoue dismantled him in that fight, Mike, and if you analyze all of those knockdowns, they were all very different as well. Narvaez even made adjustments in coming forward, which led to the second and the third knockdowns, and the way he prized the final knockdown where he did an old Ricky Hatton trick of, touching the elbows to bringing down the guard, and then shifting to the left and firing that left hook to the ribs. So he showed, I thought that that's been his best performance thus far, not only in his footwork as well, the way he was stalking and cutting off the ring against a very good, as we mentioned, a slick southpaw fighter. So he has a bit of everything. He's got a tremendous jab. He can work the body as well as anybody in the world. Super aggressive, can fight on the back foot. We've seen him making pivots and knocking out fighters as well. So the power is both, I think the power is real, both going forward and going backwards. So that puts him in good step for a tournament like this. And certainly a fighter in Payano as well will bring pressure, will bring angles as well, bring work rate. So I think it's going to be an engaging fight. I think it's going to be an exciting fight. But ultimately, I think Inoue is moving into that area where he is developing. I think he's getting better. His body is getting filled out. I think he'll only get better and better, and I think Payano will get stopped. Round 6, round 7.
Quick word on this bout, Jacob.
Just excited to see it. What do you, I know you guys said it was streaming. What service is it streaming on?
This is going to be on DAZN.
Oh, okay, good, because I'm a subscriber. So
Yeah, it's going to be on DAZN Sunday. Let's talk about the other fights in the card. Kira Relic fighting Troy Noski. Relic, I think, gave Mikey Garcia a darn good fight. Better than a lot of people anticipated. I think he's one of the best fighters in the division against a Troy Noski. You just don't know how he is in terms of his mental post that scary knockout defeat to Ndongo. I think Relic is the favorite in this fight. I'm picking him to win by decision. Your thoughts, everybody? Anyone?
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
Relic and Troy Noski on this anyway Payano undercard.
Oh man. Oh well, Relic really showed himself out in the two fights that he had against Barthélemy. Like I said, those were really outstanding fights that he had. He showed the work rate, and it's an interesting little regional fight. The Relic is from Belarus, and obviously we know Turanovsky is from Russia. So it's going to be a very interesting dynamic happening into that fight. But given the work rate, given the fact that Relic can fight at a pace that you have to really hit him hard to at least negate it, I would probably give it to Relic. Like I said, Turanovsky, like I said, he is a former world champion, but you don't shake off the knockout that he suffered, like the one that he suffered against Ndongo, quickly. Even it takes years sometimes to shake off that type of knockout. And Relic may probably give it to him again, and there'll be a good crowd to do it in too.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure Troyanovsky's ever really recovered from that brutal knockout by Ndongo. So I'd give Relic the nod in what I think will still be a fairly close fight.
Going to go to one more fight here. I'm going to go to you on this one, Gus. We talk about the plethora of very good Japanese boxers from, let's just say, strawweight up to bantamweight. We just talked about Inouye. Ioka made his U.S. debut on Superfly 3. We just had Tanaka. He just moved up and won the WBO belt last week. But the fighter that may be the most slept on among that crop of Japanese fighters, Kenshiro, who owns a belt at 108 pounds. I've seen him fight a handful of times. I think he's very good.
Brilliant.
He's fighting Milan Melindo, who also just had a belt
what a fight.
at 108 pounds. For those who pay attention to the smaller weight fighters, this is a damn good matchup.
What a fight. I'm a huge fan, as you know, Mike, of Milan Melendo. It's a fantastic fight. Kenshiro is arguably maybe the best. Some people, perceive him as the best, even though he may not be the Ring Magazine champion at the division. Our old boy Hedke Butler has that when he defeated Taguchi, but we know the good thing is a lot of them are fighting each other, and they've have wins and losses against them, so it gets a better reflection. But Melendo, I love him as a fighter, but he just has that one problem like we talked about so much in the past, whether his facial tissue can hold up to punches, because he's got so much scar tissue damage from over the years, and we saw that in the Butler fight. We saw that in the Taguchi fight, where he was doing very well early on, winning the early rounds. But but eventually you could see it was definitely bothering him, and the momentum of the fight changing. So that's the one issue I have in going into the fight with Shiro, who is a brilliant fighter, aggressive. He just has that level of maturity, good ring IQ as well. What I like about him is his distance management, Mike. He's not so reckless to the extent that a lot of these fighters who are throwing 30, 40, 50 punches, they're smothering their work. He has that ability just to manage that distance, step back, analyze, and then go back. And when he has a fighter hurt as well, Mike, he's mature enough to know that, look, go down to the body as well, especially when they're covering the head. So you can see, the cerebral sort of instincts in him as a young fighter who's getting better and better. So overall, I'm really excited for this fight, probably more than all of the other fights. I still got hope for Melendo, but I think the smart money would be on Shiro, to retain the title. But I think he'll be in the fight. I think Melendo will be game, as well as if he doesn't sustain any facial damage, Mike. He'll be game throughout the fight. So I'd probably lean towards Shiro on points, Mike.
I agree. Melendo, he's going to come forward. He's going to press the action all night long, but he can be hit. And because he can be hit, and Shiro is getting better and better with each fight. I love the technique that he fights with. And he has enough power to get Melendo's respect, and plus the issues of cuts. And I've never known Ken Shiro to be a guy who comes in the ring out of shape. I think he's going to do enough to outbox Melendo and win by decision, 8-4 range. But I'm going with Ken Shiro by decision. Quick word on this fight for anybody else before I start to shut things down.
Gus speaks for me.
Yeah, perfect good layout, but shout out to my boy Hickey Butler, man. I'm glad he's getting love out here.
And I think we start to shut the show down on that note. I'll go around the panel here. Ladies first, Gail from Communities Digital News. For folks who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk Dancing with the Stars, Game of Thrones, small business advice, environmental issues, and whatnot, let the people know where they can hit you up.
You bet. My regular column, Ringside C, appears in Communities Digital News. That's COM, C-O-M-M, Digi, D-I-G-I, News, comdiginews.com. And I'm on the Twitter as PR Pro San Diego.
I got him to come out the back cave to talk boxing with us. Gus from Corruption and Boxing, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk music. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, very quickly, Mike, is ESPN Plus picking up the Kenshiro fight, or
that Kenshiro Relic Inoue bout? That's all going to be on the Zone.
All right, then I'm gonna try and hack into Jacob's DAZN account. But no, yeah, pleasure as always, Mike. Nice to interact with the rest of you guys. I've been a bit of a boxing recluse recently, wanting to do a lot more sort of independent videos, but I just become a little bit disillusioned once more. Been focusing more on the music side, but I'll try and get back into it with these fights of the weekend. So yeah, Corruption in Boxing, YouTube. I'm also on part of a number of other sort of live podcasts, sort of BDA Boxing. I do that as well occasionally, and Pound for Pound Boxing Report.
Daniel from the Inscriber, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk the NBA, specifically the Miami Heat, which is a good time since preseason is just now kicking off. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yes, folks, you can find me on Twitter, Raucus99. You can find, like I said, good podcast buddies for Boxing News. We do our podcast normally on Tuesdays. We're going to do, I think, tomorrow night, which, by the way, I think hopefully maybe congratulations to Joe's sister on the birth of her child. It's one twist for the lay of the show, and yeah, definitely a good time to be the NBA because Tom Thibodeau's trying to get himself fired.
And if she does have, congratulations, tell her. If she does have the birth of her child, just tell her congratulations from Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Last but certainly not least, Jacob from Jab Hook, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk movies. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for having me on the show. And as always, good to hear from Gus and rest of the panel. Yeah, I could be found at Twitter, JRATM23. And, if you're into movies, my friend's podcast, Wrong Reel, they just did an episode on kind of the best of blaxploitation movies. So that was a pretty good episode that he had a special guest on. And then Gus, I'll Skype you my account information for the zone.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Why not?
Wow. It's very kind of you.
Man, stream that damn thing like I did to watch the Joshua bout. You can find
Well, we have to watch out also. Remember, Gus is in Europe. I don't know if the DAZN app is actually region locked or not.
Okay, one quick question here before I give my information in the chat. I'm sorry for the YouTube chat. I wasn't checking out the whole time. Shout out to Big Apple. He was asking our reaction to the press tour for Fury and Wilder. Quick word on that, please.
Gus, the floor is yours on that one.
Brilliant. Mike, I think Tyson Fury has been playing 3D chess from the outset, both in terms of the opponents that he brought back for his rehabilitation, so to speak. And we saw in this press conference, Mike, this is Tyson Fury in his element. The mental games, the psychological warfare. You're not going to beat him at this. And I think we saw the culmination in right at the end where he feinted to throw a punch and Wilder jumped, and you can see that that Wilder is a highly emotional character, and thus provoking him and invoking him with all of these insults and whatever else. But ultimately, it's a lot of bullshit, Mike, because both of them are very good friends and have been for a while. So you got to look at it in that perspective. But there still is a factor that I think Tyson Fury has been playing 3D chess. I think he was maybe not 100% wholeheartedly, but I think, he left a hell of a lot in the ring. I don't think he wanted to show very much. So he's going to use this element, exactly what he did with Vladimir Klitschko. And we saw Vladimir Klitschko was absolutely rattled, Mike. He'd always been accustomed to people in press conferences showing him the level of respect as the older statesman, as a significantly long champion. But Fury didn't put up with any of that. He showed him no respect whatsoever. Taunted him, appearing in different costumes, printing T-shirts with rhetoric with him on it. And we saw that coupled with Vladimir Klitschko's personal problems, that in the ring he just couldn't pull the trigger. And I think Tyson Fury is using that element with Deontay Wilder as well. So people are saying that Wilder shouldn't really be engaging with him, but come on, man, these are guys who don't take a backseat to anybody. They're 6'7", 6'9". They're not used to anybody talking down on them. We saw with Billy Joe Saunders, hightailing it out of Burger King or Nando's, whatever it was. So that's what it's like. You can't really intimidate these guys, but Fury is capable of doing it. So he's going to use that mental warfare. And I think in the fight, Mike, I think he turns southpaw from round 2. I think he realizes that Wilder can't fight against the southpaw, or isn't very good at it from what he's shown in the past. And I think that's going to be his strategy. So if there's anybody who's able to, play that mental psychology game and use that and sort of go Deontay Wilder into an emotional fight where he's just looking to level him out, I think Fury will use his lateral movement, turn southpaw, and he's got a chance of outboxing in that sense. So I think it's all going in the strategy, Mike.
Quick word from everybody else. Reaction to the press tour. What you've seen so far from Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury.
You know, there's been a little bit of the physicality, the pushing, shoving, the trash talk, the big talk. I think they put on the show everyone expected, including today in Los Angeles. I think it's just about as scripted as Mayweather-McGregor. And the two are both pulling one over on us, at least to this point, because right now it's just the marketing show. It's just to hype the thing up. Tickets went on sale today, and I understand at Staples Center, Jacob tells us that the seats, at least the lower cost seats, are pretty much gone. So they've done exactly what they set out to do. Get people interested. Once again, butts in seats. That's the first step. Buying the pay-per-view, the second step. And they're doing their jobs right now and doing it well. What they do in the ring is a completely different job, and we'll be able to talk about that in the coming weeks.
I like the theatrics. Like, it's pretty much theatric. We can pretty much tell that they're putting on the show. Tyson's people have to be careful though, because on the Garcia, if you could correct me, was it BT Sports that had the original press conference, or Box Nation?
It was at the BT Sport Tower. Basically, all of Frank Warren's fighters are now with him, and they're doing the pay-per-view in the UK. So, yeah, it was at their headquarters in London.
Okay, that part I saw it. Tyson better be careful saying "boy" the way he said it in the US, in LA, mind you, to a black man. Because I'm like obviously, like I said, we know this is part of the script. They're trying to hype up the fight. Apparently, they already made over $1 million in ticket sales. So they're doing their job, like Gail said. But you got to know your environment, unfortunately. And Tyson has only known, as far as building and promoting fights that have been signed in the UK, where he knows the social norms, he knows the social rules. No matter how many he breaks. It's a different ball game in the US and the current environment that we're in. You say the wrong thing in the wrong city, and Los Angeles is one of those wrong cities, you might get more than what you asked for. So they got it. Everybody likes the stick. It's all very nice, but you just gotta be careful, because unfortunately you're always gonna have those variables, because you never know. Billy Joe might try to distract from his failed drug test by pulling another stunt. So
yeah, you right. You right. Here's the thing. And you mentioned Billy Joe. This may sound weird, but as crazy as Tyson Fury may be or is, oddly enough, I think once he's fully invested into a fight, he has more control than Billy Joe Saunders. He will go there, but he will not cross the line like Billy Joe has done in and out of the ring. And you can tell by the way Billy Joe Saunders has been acting and what he's been caught up in the lead up to his fight with Andrade.
That's an excellent point, Mike. I think you've hit the nail on the head. That's why Fury is taking the fight right now, because it's impossible to keep him motivated. And you know what's going to happen in between. If the fight was going to happen in 2-3 years down the line, or even a year and a half, he's going to go off the rails, and you know what's going to happen. His weight is going to, balloon, etc. And he just has no discipline in that sense. So this will keep him motivated. This will keep him fired up, and win or lose, he'll accept it, and he'll move on, and he'll be handsomely rewarded. So I don't think he's put too much pressure or stress on him in that sense that if he loses, what happens to his career? I don't think he really cares. I think this is pretty much it for him.
Yeah, and two things can exist at the same time. We know that in a lot of these cases, press conferences, they kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? You know what to expect. It's kind of scripted in a sense, directly or indirectly. However, you can kind of see what's coming, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that mental games, or as Gus noted, psychological warfare is not being played, especially from Fury's side. That's what he does when he's presented with a real challenge. Um, he does it with opponents. He does it with the media. And you can tell from jump that's what he's doing in this fight. Um, his goal in the ring is to confuse Wilder, to have him flustered where he doesn't know what to do, where it will be tough for Wilder to get to him with the shot. Outside the ring, he's just trying to get into Wilder's head, where he's just bent up and full of anger that he loses control. Not just do something, act out, but loses focus, that he just comes in the ring angry. That's what he did to Klitschko, to the point where Klitschko was just left in a ball of wax, and he just couldn't let things go in there, couldn't let the punches flow. And he's trying to do the same thing in effect to Wilder in the lead up to this fight. So, yeah, part of this is scripted, but that doesn't mean that Tyson Fury specifically is trying to really work some games in there and just trying to, in effect, get into Wilder's head. So, from my perspective, that's what you're seeing here.
Can we talk? Actually, you brought up a difference there. In the Klitschko, when Tyson was playing games with Klitschko, there was also other things happening with Klitschko involving his wife, like said, having postpartum depression. He had that going for him.
Yes.
On top of Tyson Fury's going ahead, Deontay does not have those worries. Like I said, he can be laser focused, and Mike, you know as well as I do, there are very few things that are as dangerous and as foolhardy to invoke as a very pissed off Southern black man.
Yeah. For me, that's why when Wilder, he has, inside the chaos, he has to keep a state of calm. You saw that with the Ortiz bout when he got hurt. He still kept his focus even though he was in trouble and he looked like he was on the verge of getting knocked out. You can see he could see the light at the end of the tunnel. Let's hope he does that here. Well, not hope, because it sounds like I'm just going to be just blindly pro Wilder. But we will see if Wilder has the ability to do the same thing. I have a sense that he will, but again, the mind games are going here from Fury's side. That is what he does. I gave everyone an opportunity to give their information. I'm going to give mine right quickly as we sign off. You know what it is with me. If you want to check me out, talking boxing, talking music, talking fitness, just look over Twitter. You know what it is, Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, blog page is the place to go to. p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com is the link. Check the right of the page. You can find links to our channels all over social media, as well as the links to where to find the podcast on all platforms that carry podcasts, minus Spotify. I want to thank Gus, who was in the YouTube chat earlier, Big Rotten Apple, Battle Rifle, I think that's it. Yeah. Who was all in the Olaf, who was in the chat on the live YouTube chat. Thank them for joining us on the show.
Respect to the chat. Yeah.
Respect to the chat. On the next episode, we would do a recap of Srisaket and his fight with Diaz. We would do a recap of the DAZN Chicago card. with Vargas, Dulorme, Beterbiev, Smith, Roman, Gavin, McDonnell, Big Baby Miller, his fight with Adamek. And we will also do a recap of the Yokohama, Japan card with Inoue and Payano, Relic, and Troinoski, Kenshiro, and Milan Malindo. And we will do a preview of Terrence Crawford and his upcoming bout with Jose Benavidez. Shakur Stevenson fighting on the undercard, and the second part of the World Boxing Super Series Bantamweight Tournament as Zolani Tete. He's going to be fighting Aloyan, in Russia. So we will talk about all of those bouts, plus other boxing news and whatnot. So yeah, for Gail from Communities Digital News, Jacob from Jab Hook, Gus from Corruption and Boxing, Daniel from The Inscriber. I'm your host, Michael. This has been episode 224 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. Everybody have a good evening. Good night.
Das Vidania.